Welcome to the call, everyone. I'm Emily Goldman. I'm founder of Tamarind Financial Planning. And in my professional life, I'm a financial planner. I'm passionate about creating financial freedom for busy families. And to me, that means freedom from financial worries that build up as our families grow and life becomes more complex and busy. And in my personal life, I'm a mom, and I know it's so challenging to manage the busy family schedule, and on top of that, find some time, some energy to focus on the lifestyle and financial decisions. So I commend you for taking the time today. Our guest speaker today is Melissa Tossetti of The Savvy Life. Melissa is a nationally recognized author, speaker, and teacher on the topic of personal finance from a lifestyle perspective. She's the author of the international bestseller, Living the Savvy Life, and she teaches college courses on savvy living, is regularly quoted in the national media, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce Melissa Tossetti.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you. Well, as you said, I am the founder of The Savvy Life, and for the last 8 years, I have been doing webinars such as this one and teaching in-person events across the U.S. But I spend most of my days actually working one-on-one with individuals and families to help them plug their financial leaks, streamline their spending, create spending plans, and what I think is most importantly, to teach them how to live within those plans. And one of the things that I very often talk about is the impact that our homes have on our personal finances. In fact, a while back, I received a message from a Twitter follower who replied to a post that I had done. And I think the post was something to the effect of, is your home environment warm, comforting, and expressive of who you are? And the reader commented that he appreciated the sentiment, but asked how it relates to money management. And, you know, it's a great question. In my own personal experience and in my experience of working with so many different clients, at this point I've worked with over 400 clients, individuals and families on their personal finances. I've found that the state of our homes has either a negative or a positive impact. And the reason that I say that is that, and actually, Emily, do you mind popping over to the next slide? What I found is that when we are not comfortable in our own homes, we don't want to be there. And when we don't want to be there, we will find any excuse to leave. And very often that is a pay-for-play situation. We might escape to the movies, escape to the mall, which creates this terrible cycle where we're bringing more things home into our home, which often adds to the clutter that is the problem in the first place. There's dishes in the sink, and so we wouldn't want to cook, so we're going out to eat more often than we would necessarily want to. And so what I find is that we're, to a great degree, we're paying to not be at our homes. And every time I do this particular webinar or this particular topic, I find that it's very confessional. You'll learn more about my own experiences than you might like to know. But this topic is very near and dear to my heart because it was one of the catalysts or one of the reasons why I decided that I wanted to teach personal finance from this lifestyle perspective, because I saw that yes, you should track your spending and you should spend, less than you make. But I also started to see that these areas of our lives impacted our overall financial well-being. So this issue with clutter in our homes driving us out of our homes, buying clothes and having them hang in their closets with the tag still on them versus this idea of creating a wardrobe. So much of this is also based on the fact that these are the areas that I struggled with. I struggled with greatly. And when it comes to the home, this was a big one for me. And I remember very specifically there was a particular catalyst to my deciding that this was a problem. I live here in Redwood City. I've been in the same house for 24 years. My husband and I rented the house for 5 years before we were offered to buy it from our landlord, which was a wonderful experience. We still call him our guardian angel. But I but when we were renting, I just always struggled. There's always clutter in the corners, and it's, even though I knew how to sweep, I didn't have routines around keeping the house clean, and I just always felt kind of beaten down by it. And I remember one winter, it was February. This is probably at this point about 20 years ago. My husband Paul and I, we went with two of our dear friends to Disney World, and we spent a week, left cold California to spend a week in sunny, warm Florida, stayed at a beautiful hotel. Everything was so nice and in its place and clutter-free. And I'll never forget, we came home, landed at SFO, came home, and I walked in the door, and the house was a disaster. I didn't clean it before we left. The heater was turned off the entire time we were gone, so the house smelled dank. And I thought to myself, and realized very much in that particular situation, but realized that for years, the only time I ever felt really relaxed was when I was not at my home. To go from this really wonderful experience of staying in this hotel to this disaster that was the place that I resided in was unacceptable. And so I decided that I was going to do a mass overhaul. This was around the time that home makeover shows really started to become vogue. And what I didn't realize is these home makeover shows where, over a weekend they would transform your home. They had, massive crews to do it, an unlimited budget. Well, maybe not unlimited, but there was a whole behind the scenes that I chose to ignore during this time. So I made the decision, I'm going to make over the house. I'm going to declutter everything, and I'm going to, in a weekend, and I'm going to redecorate, and it's going to be wonderful. And I remember I was so excited that I decided to take a Friday off to dedicate 3 days to it. And that Thursday, I ended up leaving work early because I was just that, it had been a couple of weeks since we got back from our trip, and I was so anxious to get to this project. So I came home, and I walked it back into the bedroom, and I changed my clothes. I walked into the living room. I rolled up my sleeves, and I burst into tears. I was so overwhelmed. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't even tell you what to do first. I just didn't know what to do. So like anybody in a similar situation, I grabbed my car keys and my purse and I left because I decided that I needed to get organizing supplies. And so I went to the mall and I ended up buying more just junk and brought it home. I wasted that entire weekend, slipped into a pretty significant depression, and went back to work with my tail between my legs because I had told, for 2 weeks, I had told everybody about this makeover project. And I was devastated. I thought that, okay, this was my reality. My reality was that if we're going to host a party, I'm going to have marathon cleaning sessions, and by the time everybody gets there, I'm going to be so exhausted, I'm not going to enjoy myself. That was the reality. If somebody knocked on the door, I was going into a state of panic because the house was a mess. That was my reality, and I realized that was just, I guess, what I had to accept, even though I didn't want to. And that morning, as I was going through my email, somehow, some way, I ended up getting a link for a website called The Fly Lady. And many of you may be aware of The Fly Lady. Her website is flylady.net. And she is a woman who had I want to say similar experience to mine, but actually hers was extraordinarily extreme. Her struggles with depression were so severe that she was actually hospitalized for it. And I encourage you to go and read her story. She's just this incredible lady and a fireball. But what she realized is that it was habits and routines that were missing from her life, that's why there was no order in her life. And I realized that was my problem too. So I started to implement the things that I learned through her website, which is a free website. You can get a subscription to receive her emails. And she tells you exactly what to do on any given day in order for you to be able to start to get rid of the clutter, to start creating housekeeping routines. And what they say, when the student is ready, the teacher will arrive. That was an extraordinarily magical moment, and I will never forget. And I told her the story. I actually interviewed her for my book, Living the Savvy Life, because we have a chapter dedicated to the home. And I let her know just what she did for me, and it was very powerful, very powerful. But what I find is that in this day and age, I am 47, and I was the first of the latchkey kids, and I was lucky because I grew up on a farm, and I was taught how to clean, but not necessarily in what order or how often or anything like that. I was just told what to do, and I did it. But what I find is that so many people, my generation and younger, never learned those habits and never learned how to care for a home. We were rightfully so told, go to college, get a good job, and that's it. But there's all these other aspects of our lives that we need to create order in and take care of, and our homes is one of them that I have learned more people struggle with than not. And so, as I mentioned, this topic is very near and dear to my heart. So how do you...
And Melissa, I was just thinking, sorry to jump in.
No, it's great.
I was just thinking, when you were talking about that, it's even if you, like, I know a lot of people have a service come in or a person come in once a week or every other week or something to clean. Mm-hmm. And even if you do that, because I did that for a while, the whole clutter thing doesn't go away. Like, most people can't fix your clutter problem.
Yeah.
Right. Like there might be a clean bathroom, but there still could be sort of this really oppressive environment.
Agreed. It's almost, this sounds very extreme, but it's almost like a disease. I'll actually talk about decluttering in a few minutes, but that to me is one of the biggest struggles that we as Americans have as part of our because we have a consumption or a consuming culture. Well, that stuff has to go somewhere, and it ends up going in the corners and on top of the tables, and it's like a never-ending battle. You have to get it out, and you have to defend your home from it coming back in.
I know, it's true.
Yeah. So, and I will say this, and I should have added this. There are a lot of my clients do have housekeepers and that come in, and especially with families where both people are working, that it's a justified expense if you can afford it, and especially if you despise house cleaning. Great. What I'm talking about today is, again, a big part on the clutter, but also if you can just kind of create some habits around the house not getting so bad.
Right.
Pay more for the housekeeper.
Or you have to worry about cleaning house before the housekeeper comes.
Before the housekeeper, yes. My mother-in-law used to always do that. My father-in-law, it would drive him crazy. But I get it. Yeah. So actually, Emily, if you wouldn't mind clicking over to the next slide. So one of the things that I love doing with these different presentations is, basically starting with the end in mind. It's one thing to, first you declutter, and then you create habits, and then you create these routines. But I feel like it's important to know what you're working toward. And so, a homework assignment I would have for you is, what do you want your home to look like? What would make it your own personal sanctuary? And for a lot of people, the number one thing is getting rid of the clutter, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But others, it's maybe decorate, painting the walls in a certain way. I'm talking to you from my home office, and I have one wall. I forget about it because it's been my office for the last 10 years. But the focus wall in my office is this Oriental red that I just adore. It speaks to me. I'm so happy coming into my office because of the decor. This is of all the rooms in my home, this is the one that I feel the most comfortable. This is my sanctuary. And so it's a matter of really looking around, going into somebody else's home, and how do you feel when you're in their home? Are you agitated? Is there a lot of clutter there? Or is this a place where you really relax? If that's the place you really relax, what color are the walls? What type of furniture do they have? And just start paying attention to how you feel in certain environments, so that you can start to figure out what you want your sanctuary to look like. And the one thing that I will say is, don't be in a hurry. Our homes are constant, I don't want to say works in progress, but they're but they're constant works in progress. It's, trying to redo your entire home, that's not a weekend project. That's not a shopping spree. Our homes should evolve, and they should be a manifestation of who and what we are at any given moment of our lives, which we constantly evolve, right? We constantly evolve. So our homes should as well. All right, Emily, do you mind popping over to the next slide? All right, let's roll up our sleeves and talk about clutter. I spoke on a panel at the Professional Business Women's Conference. This was, probably 10 years ago. It was actually one of the first presentations that I ever gave. And there were about 200 women in the audience, and it was me. It was a woman who talked about fashion, affordable fashion, and then there was a woman who talked about homekeeping, or specifically clutter. She owned a home organization business, but you could also hire her folks to come into your home and help you declutter. And I gave a pretty good speech. I was pretty proud of my speech, and the woman that gave the fashion speech was amazing. She blew my hair back with what a great presenter she was. The woman that gave the decluttering presentation was shaking when she was giving the presentation. She spoke so softly, so many ums and so many ahs. Every single question in that room was directed at her at the end of the presentation. That was a moment for me where I realized just how many people really struggle with this overwhelm of stuff. And I have never forgotten that, and I realized as I give presentations and as I'm working one-on-one with clients, this is something that we talk about. Are you comfortable in your own home? If not, okay, then it's the clutter. Okay, so the clutter that's affecting your finances, right? Because this is stuff that you're buying but you're not using, and it's all interconnected. It's all interconnected. So it's a physical drain, it's a financial drain, and it is a mental drain. It also costs us because we can't find the black shoe polish that we know we have 5 bottles of until we actually buy the 6th bottle, and guess what? We found all 5 bottles now. Or things get ruined because they get, lost in the clutter and they don't get cared for like they should. There's just so many detrimental things that this clutter creates. So how do you get rid of it? Well, for the love of God, please don't do what I did and try to spend a weekend going through your entire house. That does not work. But I strongly suggest taking the Fly Lady approach, which I love, which is this idea that you set a timer for 15 minutes, and in that 15 minutes, you basically go around your house and you're going to throw away anything that is garbage, right? The mail that's piled up, the junk mail that's piled up, or the pizza box that your kid put on the counter instead of taking it outside. That type of thing. So you take care of that, and then anything that doesn't have a home, you start either you get rid of it if it's not something that serves you anymore, or you find a home for it, and then it's not clutter, right? On the flip side, there is an extraordinarily popular book by a woman named Marie Kondo. Many of you that are listening to this have probably heard of her. Her book is called The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. Have you heard of it, Emily?
Oh, I read it. I loved it, and I was so inspired, and I took a very weak stab at a couple parts of my house, and I never she has like, oh, I love it, but I guess there needs to be I guess that's the habits you're going to talk about. You have to build up somehow to
exactly.
stay up.
Exactly. I believe that when it comes to decluttering, actually both her her system as well as the Flies Lady system, between the two, is the way to go. So you're kind of chipping at things 15 minutes at a time, right? But then when you have that day where you've got a lot of energy and you're ready to really tackle something big, then you do the Kondo way, Marie Kondo, the author. And basically what her whole premise is if something does not spark joy in you, and those are her words, spark joy, and it's not something that you need or use on a regular basis, then let it go. Your home you should only be surrounded by things that spark joy, and that's one of the things that I love so much about my office is it's very streamlined. The picture of my husband and I in front of Edinburgh Castle and a picture of my son Dante. I have my Sherlock Holmes books in a certain spot, but there's no other stuff in here, and I can relax and I'm happy in here. The other thing that she does, which I think is extraordinary, but it does take some energy, is she has you declutter by subject. So she usually suggests that people start with their clothes, and then you go to like books, and then you go to paperwork, and so but the idea is that you're doing it all at one time. So my experience with her, and when I realized just how powerful this process is, I keep a pretty streamlined wardrobe, so I knew that I didn't need to do my wardrobe. But I thought, well, let me try my books. I worked in a bookstore for years. My husband did as well. There's two bookcases in my office, two in my bedroom. I mean, there's bookcases all over. But the funny thing is that for those of you that are familiar with Book Buyers in Mountain View, that used to be in Mountain View, my husband and I had an account there, and every probably 2 to 3 months, we would take 3-4 bags of books to Book Buyers, and we would sell them for credit and to exchange or whatever. So we had just gone about 6 weeks prior to me trying to do this process, this condoing process. But I thought, let me give it a try. And the thing that is different about her process is that you actually take everything off the shelf. So like if you were doing your wardrobe, you would actually take all your clothes out of your closet, pick each individual item up, and then decide to get rid of it or put it back based on whether or not it sparks joy. So I did the same with my bookcases. I took every one of my books out of all the bookcases in all the different rooms in the house, put it on the bed, and I was pretty impressed with how many books I owned. I like to think that I'm not a collector, but that may not be the case with books. But I started looking through the books, and I would pick each book up and ask myself, either do I need this for work or reference, or does it give me joy? And I ended up taking 9 bags of books to Book Buyers after having just decluttered my books 6 weeks prior. There's something about seeing everything all together. I also realized I had 6 duplicates. I had 2 copies of the same book, but because the books were all over the house, I didn't realize that. And I'm kind of embarrassed about that. I told you this webinar is very confessional.
How many books did you end up keeping, Melissa?
How many? You know what? That's a great question. I did not count, but somewhere I have a picture of all the books in the back of my car that I did donate.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I think she says you only need like 2 or 3 books or something.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not a Kindle person, so you have to take with a grain of salt, including myself say.
Make it work for you.
Exactly. Yeah. Although I will say, as I said, my wardrobe is very streamlined, so I'm very confident there. But so there's those 2 avenues, right? So a little bit at a time on a daily basis, and then those, attack those subjects, in bigger quantities. The other thing that I would add is if this is really an area where you're paralyzed by, or there's some emotional struggles with it, you may want to consider asking a very trusted friend or family member to come in and help guide you. You don't want somebody who is going to be ruthless, okay, because we are attached to our stuff. There is an emotional connection there. If you get somebody who's ruthless and is giving you a bad time about getting rid of that stuff, you're going to have a terrible experience, and then it's going to amplify, and you're not ever going to want to get rid of anything. But if you have somebody that you trust that you can gently just have conversations with about the individual things, it's definitely worth it. And also, if this is an area that you struggle with, it may be worth hiring somebody to help you out with that if you can justify the expense. All right. If you
Melissa, do you do it?
Worth it. What was that?
Is this one of the things you would help people with?
No, that's definitely not my expertise. But I know a lot of people that are in that industry, and unfortunately, they're all over the United States. I don't know anybody here as far as that goes. I wish I did.
I have one really good person who's helped me with organizing and basically getting rid of lots of stuff.
That it's expertise, right?
It is, and patience, and like a little bit holding people accountable. Like, Emily, did you even look at that in the last 3 years? No. Okay, you said we don't need it. Like, oh,
right.
Okay.
Yeah. It's funny. I think that a lot of times, and I would say that I'm not a huge gender differences person, but I would say that the one thing that we as women do have a tendency to do is we have a tendency to think that we should be experts at everything. And I have learned that, you know what, I am not, clothes is just not, shopping for clothes is not something that I got that DNA at birth. Somehow it hit my mom, but it bypassed me. And so every couple of years I invest in a stylist. And that is what her expertise is. She's amazing. And it's money well spent because I love the clothes that I get when I'm with her, and I know that I'm going to use them and their quality. It's the same thing with this. It's if this is an area where you're struggling, there are people out there that it's very natural for them, and also that they understand that other people struggle with it. So there's no accusation, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. Do you mind going to the next slide? All right, so homekeeping habits and routines. I talked about this growing up. I knew how to sweep. I knew how to clean. But one of the things that I realized as an adult is that the reason our house stayed so clean growing up is because my mom told me what to do, right? She told me she ran it, she managed it. And so what I realized was that I didn't have systems and routines for a specific day that I would sweep and mop the kitchen floor. It sounds very type A, but that is what I have found that works for me. Is I needed that routine. So that's what I want to talk to you a little bit about today. And if you would mind, clicking on that next slide. But what I think is critical to talk about before talking about specific routines is to talk about homekeeping habits. What I find is that we very often throughout our day, we have habits that make homekeeping that much more challenging. That if we can overlap, replace the negative habits with positive ones, then it all just happens organically, right? That we're not having to think about that pile of mail that needs to be, the junk mail needs to be thrown away and the mail needs to be gone through. It's just that every single day when the mail comes in, you take that 1 minute and you get rid of the junk mail and you open up the bills and you put them in their proper place. And it's funny because what I started to do with a lot of these is I would actually time myself, because I would think in my head that something would take a lot longer than it really did, just because I didn't want to do it. But when I realized that the mail does literally take me, 45 seconds to 60 seconds to manage on most days, but if I don't manage it, it can take me an hour at the end of the month, and I am hating every second of it, then it's an impetus for me to manage that mail daily. The dishes, this is a huge one for people. Dishes in the sink. When there are dishes in the sink, we don't want to cook a meal. When we don't want to cook a meal, we end up going out or ordering takeout. And so what we've worked very hard at in our family is that the dishes go in the dishwasher. The dishwasher gets run every night. And my goal is, and this happens most days, is that while I'm brewing my second cup of coffee, I am unloading the dishwasher. And if anything got put in the sink while the dishwasher was running in the middle of the night, then it goes in there. The Fly Lady talks about our sinks quite a bit. In fact, the name of her book, which is a really good book, I'm looking at it now, is called Sink Reflections. And it's this idea that if we can keep a clean sink, that habit will domino into other habits. It's like the broken window syndrome. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, Emily, where in a neighborhood, if a broken window doesn't get fixed, the crime rate starts to go up in that area and will go down. It's that same idea with the sink. If once the sink has dirty dishes in it, then you're not being as mindful of the rest of the house, and everything goes to pot. So
right.
Yeah. And the one thing that I want to add, and this is critical, I realize in my life I talk a lot about growing up on a farm, and I grew up across the street from my grandparents, and between them and all my aunts and uncles that also lived on dairy farms, one of the things that I learned is that we are all members of a family, and we all have to pull our share. Otherwise, things don't happen that are critical. And what I found in moving to the Bay Area is that very often in the Bay Area, a lot of families, the kids are the center of attention, and the parents do all of the housework, and the kids don't have any real responsibility. Well, what I found is, this is actually an experience that some friends of ours had. Their kids went off to college, and that first year of college was catastrophic for them because they didn't know how to cook, they didn't know how to do their own laundry, they didn't know how to care for their dorm rooms, and so there was a complete, everything was a disaster. So on one hand, by having the entire family pitch in, you're teaching them skills, life skills, critical life skills. I don't care how good your job is. At some point or another, it's likely that you're going to have to cook a meal for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So you'll want to even. You'll get tired of eating out.
Exactly. And then the other aspect of it is that, and as I feel really strongly about, in many households, I'll be very careful with this, caring for the home and getting the groceries and all of that homekeeping stuff has the tendency to fall unfairly more on one person than the other. And even when both spouses are working, it's still falling more on one person than the other. And so that's not fair. Everybody lives in the house. Everybody is benefiting from having a roof over their head and running water and food to eat. Everybody should pull their fair share. So when I talk about these tips, I beg you to keep in mind that what your family can do to help contribute to it. And this is not all just dumped on you, because if you're listening to this, you're likely the person that is managing it right now. Yeah. Laundry is one that we find it's very easy for it to build up, and then it's doing laundry all day long on a Saturday, which is miserable. So one of the things that the Fly Lady talks about is this idea of this may be one of our older tips, but you throw the laundry in at night, dry it in the morning, and then as you're getting ready for work, just folding it up real quick as soon as it comes out and putting it away. But if you can just manage, if it's at all possible to manage just one load a day, you're just so far ahead of the game. Cleaning up after yourself is critical. It sounds like such a silly thing, right? It's kind of like, spend less than you make, but yet we struggle. And the one confession I will have is that I can be very much a hurricane when it comes to cleaning, where I will pull stuff away from the wall in the living room and then decide, I need to go into the bathroom and put Comet on the bathtub. So I'll take all the shampoos and everything out and put it in the sink, Comet the bathtub, but you have to leave the Comet to set. So then I'll go into the bedroom and I'll strip the sheets and I'll throw those into the laundry, and then about 5 o'clock, I'm exhausted and nothing is done. And I've actually made more of a mess in all of my cleaning efforts than I have cleaned up. And so I have to be constantly vigilant, even after all this time, to only do one project at a time. And that is a habit that I think is one of the key things that when I'm on it, it really does make a big difference. And then also listen to hear yourself say, oh, I'll do that later. Like putting something down where it doesn't belong and saying, oh, I'll take care of that later. And then a week later, you realize that that hasn't moved yet when it really could have been taken care of in just a few seconds. So these are all just, again, just habits that if you can manage them on a moment-to-moment basis can make all the difference in the world. Even these are the ones, especially when you have the housekeeper.
Yeah.
This is your end, right? This is where you can keep up your end of the bargain.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Yep. Perfect. Thank you. So, talking about homekeeping routines, this is these next two slides are some of my favorites because in any given day, and I do this with work too, I want to know what I need to do and just get it done. I don't want to have to, when I go to do something, I don't want to have to think about what it is that needs to be done. I want to know it and get it done and marked off my list. If I have to sit there and think about what needs to be done, I could have already executed it. And so one of the things that, this is taken out of a page from the Fly Lady, is that on any given day, there's a certain weekly housekeeping chore that needs to be done. And the majority of these can be done within less than 5 minutes. So depending on how your work day ends up, if you can knock these out before you go to work, in 5 minutes before you go to work, and then you come home and it's done, it's wonderful. That is wonderful. And this is actually this is my personal weekly routine. Mondays is to sweep and mop the kitchen. Tuesdays, if just to create the habit to empty the garbage and the recycling. Wednesdays is to dust and vacuum. I hate dusting, so I try very hard to get my husband and my son to do it. Cleaning the bathroom on Thursdays, emptying the garbage again and recycling it because that's something that tends to need to be done more often than not. And then on the weekend, launder all the linen because you have more time. That's just because that's laundry. The weekend is the best time to do that. Now, with the exception of laundering the linen, you'll see that all this other stuff is stuff that's done through the week, right? One of my ancillary goals with the Savvy Life is to give people back their weekends. The one thing about growing up that I really didn't like was the marathon cleaning sessions that we used to do on Saturday mornings. It was just pretty miserable. 2 to 3 hours on a beautiful spring day spent sweeping, mopping, cleaning grout with a toothbrush.
Oh my gosh.
Sometimes. And I think especially as adults, we so much of our weekends are spent running errands and taking care of things, and we don't get a chance to actually really relax and do the things that we want to do. So if we can knock out the majority of our to-dos during the week and it's just a routine, then we can get much of our weekend back. On the next slide, if you don't mind, I'll go a little bit deeper with routines. Again, this is straight out of the Fly Lady's playbook, but what she suggests is that on a monthly basis, you end up going from one end of your house to another and do a deeper clean on specific rooms per week. So an example would be that the first week of the month, you would go through your living room and your porch, and she has lists of exactly what to clean. But one thing might be to wipe down the light switches. Another is to clean the baseboards. Go into your front porch and get rid of the cobwebs. Sweep off the front porch. Right? There's that deeper dive that might take you 10 or 15 minutes to execute. The next week, it's the kitchen and laundry room. So maybe you're wiping down the shelves in the refrigerator. Maybe you're cleaning the side of the refrigerator next to the garbage can that kind of gets grimy. And you just go through and you get the idea that this just gives you a chance that throughout the month, from one end of your house to the other, you're getting this deeper clean. And I love that. And I will say that there are months where none of this gets done because our schedule is just so crazy. And then there are other months where I get to execute every single thing on the list, and it feels so good. So give it a try. And like I said, definitely go to her website, find these monthly routines, and then make them yours. Create the list specifically for your apartment, specifically your condo, your house, and give it a try. It's pretty powerful stuff. All right, so the next slide is about home projects. This one did not become, this one was not on my radar until probably about 7 years ago. We had remodeled our house with this little 600 square foot house that we added 600 feet to. And after that, we had this kind of idea of these different projects that we wanted to get done around the house. And then one day I realized that it had been about 3 years and not a single project was accomplished in that time. And I realized that, 7 more years could go by. It could be 10 years later and we still haven't done anything. And so I started this idea and have started teaching this and have been, had great feedback from clients about it, is creating a home projects list based on what you want to accomplish in the coming year. So between now and December 31st, look around your home and decide what projects do you want to do. The home repairs, right, the fixing the broken, and also the home improvements. And what you're going to do is you're going to create that list. You are going to price out, get an estimate of how much it's going to cost you to execute those particular projects. And then also, how much time will each project take? Because that's critical as well. And once you have that list, then what you're going to do is you're going to prioritize that list first based on urgency. So the example I will give you is in our bathroom, we have water damage from the shower hitting the sheetrock. And so last weekend, my husband went out and bought what we needed for the project. Sadly, the project will be done this weekend because my husband was working on it and he cut himself with the X-Acto knife. So he needed steel, yes. But yes, I'm looking very much forward to this weekend, that project getting taken care of. But if we did not take care of that, then that rot could get worse and worse and worse, right? So, so you want to take care of those things first. But then the beauty of pricing this out, both time and money, is that you give yourself an opportunity to say, hey, we have Saturday off and we have the money available in order to do said project. Let's get it done. And pretty soon, because you know exactly what it's going to take time and money-wise, you're able to execute versus in that moment try to figure out, okay, well, what should we do, right? What project should we work on? How much is it going to cost? You're halfway there. The one thing that I will add to this, and this is, again, going back to that idea of taking back the weekend, and this is something that my husband and I have implemented for years now, and it's one of my favorite habits, is that we try to get to the supply store during the week to get the supplies that we need in order to execute these different projects. Emily, you're in the San Mateo, San Carlos area, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you've experienced Redwood City's population. I'm here in Redwood City, and our population has exploded in the last year and a half. Going to the grocery store during the weekend is ridiculous. Trying to drive anywhere on El Camino is ridiculous. We find that we can save ourselves so much time if we can swing by the supply store on our way. And actually, the habit that we have is on Friday, and today's Friday, and we will be doing this. My husband owns a martial arts school here in Redwood City, and what we do is we go on the way, we leave an hour early, we go to Costco, buy our supplies that we need at Costco, and then next door we go to Orchard Supply Hardware, and I pick up what I need for the garden, he picks up what he needs for whatever project that is, so that on Saturday morning we can just get to work. And we've saved so much time and so much frustration. Inevitably, with most projects, you have to go back, but at least you've got one of those trips out there, right? So yeah, I feel very, very strongly about that, because by the time most people would have taken to go and get their supplies and come back and be exhausted and have to recover, you could actually be done with your project, depending on what it is.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's just so annoying when you come back just in a bad mood and not ready to dive into a project.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I I've learned over the years that I get exhausted by being in stores. Like, I hate them all. There's just something about just being, having to be around so many people and everything. And so, yeah, by the time I get back from shopping, I need an hour and a cocktail to recover. All right. If you wouldn't mind just going to the next slide. So again, kind of going back to this idea that our home should be our sanctuary. We've decluttered. We have habits that we're putting into place now. We have routines about keeping the house clean. And now it's the fun stuff. What do you want your sanctuary to look like? And I am a huge Pinterest junkie, like a massive Pinterest junkie. But one of the things that I love about it is it gives you an opportunity to really, you can save photos into like a Pinterest folder, and you get to see patterns. What is it that, an individual picture might attract you, but when you see 30 pictures all together of things that attracted you, you might be able to see patterns. And I really learned this actually before Pinterest. Things would catch my attention and I would tear it out of a magazine. And one day I was working on a project, and I decided to take all of the pictures that I pulled out, and I have these wires and clips. I'm pointing at them right now, and you can't see me pointing at my wall. Crack myself up. But I clipped all these different photos up onto these wires on my wall, and I realized once I got to see them all next to each other that there was a pattern in each of almost every single one of the pictures where it was a piece of nature that was brought into the room, and that's what was attracting me. It was a big tree branch that was transformed into a coat rack, or a beautiful branch that was hanging in a kitchen and herbs were hanging down from it. But without actually seeing all those things next to each other, I never would have made that connection. And so Pinterest is just such a beautiful tool to help you really define what you're attracted to. So I definitely encourage you to give that a try. All right, and the next slide. More farm stories. Going back to this is actually less of growing up on a farm, but more of having grandparents that grew up during the Depression and really valued their purchases. I think this is something that in our culture we really need to find again. We are a disposable society, and we have a tendency to, instead of fixing something, to just replace it. Maybe not caring for something like we should and having to replace it that much faster. And what I learned from my grandparents is you take care of what you have and you try to get it to last as long as possible, whether it's a coffee grinder or a pair of work boots. That was money that was spent, that was hard-earned money that was spent on something that at that time you either wanted or needed. And over time, we distance ourselves from that, remembering the value of that, and we need to remember that. And so keeping in mind, first of all, investing in quality products that are going to run the distance, taking care of them, following the directions. This is something that I really have to remember. Something gets spilled on the carpet, it needs to be cleaned up immediately before a stain sets. Which reminds me, we made green rice Krispie treats for St. Patrick's Day last night, and my son was running around the living room with a green bottle of food coloring.
Oh no!
Realized it for a minute, and I had to explain if that fell, that was it. There's no cleaning that up. So that's those things have to be picked up immediately. If you have carpets, if carpets is one of those things that we lose. When they start to get worn, we want to replace them, and then we're just dissatisfied kind of as a whole. So if you can care for your carpets, keep them in the best shape possible, investing in a shampooer, the goal is to shampoo your carpets quarterly. I have a 70-pound dog, a hamster, 2 hamsters, a cat, and a 10-year-old. We try to clean our carpets every 2 months. because otherwise it just, the carpets wear, and then I get that dissatisfaction, right? So caring for what we have, make the lawnmower last as long as possible. You get the idea. This is another one that I just feel very, very strongly about, and that we need to make some shifts here in our culture about it. All right, and then I believe the last slide, the next one. Yeah. This one I feel very strongly about too, which is this idea of don't do what I did. Don't think that you can completely make over your entire house from one end to the other in a weekend. The goal is to be able to manage your household from decluttering to taking care of those routines in, just 15 to 30 minutes a day. No more all-day marathons. Don't do that to yourself. Go out and enjoy your time with your family. No more impossible to-do lists. If your homekeeping to-do list has more than 5 chores on it, start crossing things off. Make that your mantra, that no more than 5 chores, and hopefully less in any given day. Do less and feel good about what you were able to accomplish versus having an impossible to-do list that just beats you down emotionally. And then again, you know what? Break those projects down and make them achievable and knock them out. Get them done so you can focus on other things. And just, you know what? Have fun creating your sanctuary and revel in it and enjoy it. And that's it.
Yes, definitely good advice. We're wrapping up a little bit early. I was just thinking about a couple of things while you were speaking, Melissa. Mm-hmm. Let's see, the last page is you and where to find you, so that's all for folks. And maybe before we wrap, you could just maybe give a couple minutes, like what kind of projects you do work on with people.
Oh, sure.
But one thing I was thinking of is just this whole idea of minimalism. Like, how do you think about that? Is that something that comes up with decluttering, with any of sort of scaling back, I guess, all of these things? How do you incorporate that, or do you?
I am a minimalist by nature, and I'm married to a collector.
Oh.
Which we have, and my husband is fantastic. He actually really does care for the things that he purchases, and that and he really does value them. He's not just by no means is he a hoarder, or does his his studio look like that. But it's two very, very different dynamics, and it can be a struggle. And that and in retrospect, if I look back and realize that was part of the struggle that I had originally, was kind of my own clutter issues I was trying to manage, but also realizing that he's a collector, and how do you manage that, right? And I think that this is a very common thing. I always talk about how we marry our opposites when it comes to money, and it can be the same thing with our homes as well. I come back to the Savvy Life philosophy again and again, which is, spend money on the things that you want. And very often when we really put that into play, or most often we'll give you an example. You're at Target, right? Which is the number one area where we struggle in making mindful money decisions, because they have exceptionally good marketing.
And the number one place where we bring all of our clutter from.
Yes, exactly. And it's just this mindset that, picking up an item and realizing, do I really love this? Am I madly in love with this, or is this just kind of cute? And in the moment, I'm getting this little, a burst of pleasure from making the purchase, but it's going to be in the clutter pile. One thing that I started way back in the day when I was just first making some strides in managing my home, I realized that I had a catalyst. I realized that too often I would go to the store and I would buy something, a store like Target or maybe a clothing store, and I would purchase something and I would bring it home and it would sit in the bag on the couch for like a week. And that was a trigger for me, and I realized that, you know what, I did not really want that stuff, because if I did, it would be where it should be. And so it's what I think that it is. I think that it is. It evolves. These are definitely not things that if you were in the state that I was in, I mean, I would say it took a solid year for me to transform and get rid of all the clutter and start to get the homekeeping habits and routines into place. And then from there, this kind of constant state of vigilance of what comes into the home, right? If you can do both at the same time, and really, and again, that minimalist mindset, not from the standpoint of monastic, right, which is I don't, or frugal, right, I don't deserve or I don't want these things in my life, but only just fall madly in love with the things that you bring into your home. Do not be a cheap date is the best way I could describe it. And there's, I'll just add real quick, there is a really great documentary right now on minimalism on Netflix, and I think it is just called Minimalism. But also, if you YouTube minimalism, there are a handful of really, what's the word I'm looking for? Inspiring YouTubers out there that talk about minimalism. And when I get into a moment of wanting to like really kind of jump on stuff, because things do creep back in, right? If I've let my guard down and saw that things start to creep in, I'll check out one of those YouTube videos and then I'll go on a 15-minute tear. Get rid of the clutter, get it taken care of. So
that's a good idea. Yeah, I was going to ask you if you had anyone helping you, like keeping you sort of on task during that year too.
You know, I didn't. I'm very blessed because my husband is amazing and he's very supportive, even though it was going to affect him, his home environment, but he understood and really saw how much the clutter affected me. So I was lucky that he was supportive, but no, I didn't have anybody helping me. But it is not, I'm not organized. I'm not an organized person by nature. I want to be, and that has helped tremendously. But I do read a lot of. I try to surround myself kind of in that environment of other people, whether it's a book that I'm reading or going to a YouTube video about organizing or about cleaning that helps keep me inspired. If that makes sense at all.
Yeah, definitely. That's good advice.
Thank you.
We have just a couple of minutes before the hour. Melissa, you want to just maybe give us a few ideas of what kind of things you're helping people with?
Sure. So there's really two aspects to the Savvy Life, to my business, three, actually, now that I say that. We have our website, thesavvylife.com, and we publish a weekly newsletter. We call it The List. And the idea, I talked about how we, I just want to know what I need to do so I can execute it. I hate having to think about what needs to be done. And so the list is basically inspired by that. And so on a weekly basis, readers, and it's a free subscription or a free list that you can subscribe to, but you'll receive an email with just 1 to 3 things to do that week in order to live a savvy life. And it could be anything from the not as fun stuff to call your cable company this week and ask for a better rate, to hey, it's February, it's time to start thinking about your summer vacation and looking to book it because now is when the great deals are. So it's very seasonal. And the idea is just to help support and let people know, do these things on a weekly basis in order to be able to live a savvy life. We also have articles on the website as well supporting this savvy life, this idea of living a savvy life. I teach this series of webinars, this educational classes on different topics like this one. I think we've done how to build a savvy wardrobe, how to run a savvy kitchen, savvy money habits. And then I also work one-on-one, as I mentioned before, with individuals and families to help them to manage, in the financial advisor industry, they call it cash flow planning, which just sounds terrible. We help clients create spending plans, which just sounds so much more lovely.
Yeah.
But it's that idea that in this day and age, money moves in and out of our lives in so many different directions and at such a fast pace. that we help people to create structure around that, help them figure out how to be able to streamline their spending so that they can do the things they want to do, go on those vacations, fund their kids' 529 plans while still being able to contribute to their retirement. So it's this idea that you're building a financial foundation while enjoying the journey. And so, I'm working with probably 4 to 5 clients a week, clients all over the United States, and I love every second of it.
That's great. All right, well, thanks, Melissa. We're right on 1 o'clock, and we will wrap it there.
Thank you so much, and happy housekeeping, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.